gotta wait till people like can recognize the song.
You have to be the right age.
This is a really long intro, turns out.
It really is. I feel intro shame. Oh dear.
Well, that's accurate for a lot of the ways that we're treated, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, not that part. That's less so. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. We're here.
We're here. We know we're live now because the intro to that song was so long.
Yeah, we have improved so much that now we know when we're live.
I mean, don't give us that much credit. That's like a lot. There's a lot.
This time we knew when we were live.
Okay.
Very good. Everyone did it.
Before we start, we have a rating.
Ooh.
It's
R.
Scandalous. Rated R.
Why are we rated R, Jess?
Or bad words.
Bad words.
I will say them. At least a few other people will say them.
I'm pretty sure Kelechi's going to say them.
Fuckery.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. We're already started with the fuckery.
Done it.
Important information that's not totally relevant to everything, but I just need to share that Carly let me know that she was going to be watching from the bath. So if you're in the comments, you can talk about how Carly's naked in the water right now.
Naked in the water.
You know, whatever makes you happy.
Joelle wants us to know that we're live.
Yeah.
So many.
Oh, yeah, very good. I am super excited, as always, because we get to talk about suicide and stuff. And also because we have Kelechi here. Yes. I'm really excited to talk about race and to talk about like whiteness and blackness, I think specifically in terms of suicide prevention, because this is something that we don't address very often. And well, I'm having a big week of addressing this right now, I guess, because I'm about to do some more of this at the conference for AAS at the end of the week. So here's a free preview, which is better, you know, probably than whatever I'm going to do. And Leah is going to be doing that with me, and she's on too. So.
Hi.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Hi, Leah.
Yeah. So I am Jess, and I am the director of programs at Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners. So I work with both a clinical crisis line and a peer support line that serves the state of Colorado and is the entry point into our crisis system. And then I also do activism and social justice kind of based work around lived experience and suicide, critical theory, things like that, because that's how I like to spend my free time. And then, Des, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dese'Rae Stage. I run Live Through This, which is a series of portraits and true stories of suicide attempt survivors across the U.S. I'm also an attempt survivor, and I run like 4 other sites that have to do with things like this, because I have no life.
You're an overachiever.
Other than yelling about suicide and stuff.
Yeah.
Kelechi.
Hey y'all, I am Kelechi Ubozoh, and suicide attempt survivor, activist, the editor of We've Been Too Patient, with LD Green and lots of other attempt survivors and good folks like Leah Harris, which looks at radical mental health and lots of other fun stuff and research. So that's me, and I'm currently fun employed.
Hey.
Ooh. Hey. Is it fun?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's great.
Yeah.
Do you want to just kick it off by letting us know what makes you interested in suicide, suicidology, suicide prevention, mental health, all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm someone who's a suicide attempt survivor, and I got interested in more of this work when I moved out to California 8 years ago. But my last attempt was, this is my 10-year anniversary. Happy anniversary. So I'm interested in talking about race and blackness and people of color and suicide in particular, because I was told by many people that including doctors, that, Black people aren't suicidal. And, I was some kind of anomaly, which is bullshit. And so I think my entryway was having really challenging experiences in different locations when I had a crisis or when I was suicidal, not being taken seriously, told I presented well, too high functioning, all of this interesting white supremacy stuff that I didn't have words for at the time, but now I have all these nice fun words to describe that. So that's my interest, and I'm part of the S Word foam that Des is in, and so is Leia and other folks, and I share my experiences and stories there.
That's where you coined #SuicideSoWhite.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's how people at AAS knew. They were like, "Wait, are you the Suicide So White person?" And I was like, I have a name. But yes, I am. And if that's all you know me by, that's cool too.
Also, yes.
Awesome. So, why do you think we aren't talking about race and suicide? Like, what are we doing instead?
I think focusing on who we think dies by suicide, which is white men. That's who we think. We don't think about attempt survivors. And also, a lot of communities of color, not just Black communities, will not speak openly about when a suicide happens. So it doesn't get captured in the data. So there's not always clarity that, we're experiencing it. But if, mental health and other things don't discriminate, suicide doesn't discriminate either. And, it's not a white thing. So I think that's been one of the reasons we don't talk about it. And the other reason is that people don't care about people of color. Like, that's not the focus of the interventions. It's not the focus of any of the research for the most part. It's just not, it's not raised up. There's a lot of internalized stigma from folks of color. There's also just not being seen in the world at large of suicide. Like, it's just doesn't impact us, which is not true. But I think there's just kind of like the back burner effect of this. And if folks aren't talking about it and not being seen, they're not getting funding, they're not getting great interventions, or they do get an intervention, but it doesn't get funded for long. It's like, oh, it worked for 3 years. Great. Now we're pulling your funding. Stuff like that happens. And that's like a lot to say in a short period of time. But I think those are some of the things that come up for me.
If you were going to like magic wand change any one of those things, where would you start?
I think I would start with, it's a hard thing to change all of those things, but I think I would start with saying that, like, you need to talk to suicide attempt survivors. I don't know why we're always ignored. And I don't always say always, but always very much ignored. So if not ignored, then tokenized and plotted out as like, here's a success story of someone who's still alive. And there's so much like, I have to keep this pretense that I'm like good now. So even the fact that like I had suicidal thoughts in December, I was really struggling. And I think that makes people upset. Like, they want me to be all better now, like whatever that means for them, or like, it's fixed, right? You're good, because they're more afraid for themselves than want to actually hear about what's going on. So I think the first thing is like having people say what their actual experiences are, and then listen to people who have suicide attempts, and also why they don't talk about it anymore, right? After I went to the first hospital that I went to, it was so traumatizing. I was like, shoot, I better pretend I'm okay so I don't go back there. And like, and that was my coping strategy, which was, not super successful, but it was a 15-year coping strategy. Like that's, not good time. So I think magic wand, like, not only listen, integrate suicide attempt survivors in the research, in the data, in the collection tools, and just everything. Like, why do we design things without us? We're the ones who've been there. I don't know why we're missing from the conversation.
We're not reliable.
Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Good child. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty unreliable when someone says they're going to help me and they traumatize me. So, I have to, navigate, when you're having that conversation where you're like, I need support, but I don't want to deal with the cops. So what are the words I can choose to get what I need, but not end up in a cop car? Like, why is that even why is that even a thing? Like, why are cops first responders? Like, that's another question. So anyways, I could clearly go on for a while, but I'd magic wand and say that we need to like be up in everything, designing, creating, and that would be a first step. And then also, I mean, I don't know, there's so many other places we could go with this, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I think just saying like, it's okay, you don't have to be sunshiny and have this happy recovery story, because I think that people stop saying what their actual truth is because someone will say, oh, you inspired me, or you're the reason I'm staying. And you're like, oh shit, I gotta stay for this 10-year-old who heard my speech once. And it's like, that's not the takeaway message.
Yeah.
Because that's not reality. And that's also not, like romantic and pretty. It's kind of messy where I live.
I feel like we all kind of had to go through that process though of of being the good survivor and then figuring out like, oh, this is kind of bullshit. We need to be more honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that good survivor idea is something I think about and talk about a lot. I think it's like sort of the foundation of a lot of our messaging about suicide prevention. And then I also think when we start compounding it with other like marginalized identities, then that like pressure to be the good survivor is even more intense because the consequences are so much greater. So like one of the things you brought up is, law enforcement intervention. I'm pretty terrified of law enforcement intervention, but I'm also like a white, like cis, like kind of straight presenting. I think most people read me that way, woman. And I have pretty terrible interactions. So then when you start thinking about the stakes and how high they are, for people of color or disabled people, things like that, it's much more complicated. And there's the sort of external social pressure, but also this like, how do I keep myself from being killed while I'm trying to get help when I want to die pressure? That's a whole different added thing.
Right. What kind of situation is that? Like, that's the most complicated situation I've ever heard of. And that's the truth. Yeah. And so many of us who end up in a situation like that, like people of color, they're not going to the psych ward. They're going to jail. Like they're getting jail mental health. They're not getting, and not to say that when I got to the psych ward, it was all like hunky dory over there. It was not, but it's definitely different. A different experience where you get served and what ends up being on your record now and what follows you out of those places. So yeah, fun times.
Yeah. So I want to kind of dive in a little bit more, if you're up for it, into thinking about that sort of carceral system and law enforcement intervention as a primary intervention that's used for suicidal people in communities of color. I have some ideas about the history and how that came about. I have some ideas from working in the crisis system about sort of like structurally how all that works. But I'm interested in, as someone who's a part of those communities who are most affected by it, what are the things that are kind of the most salient to you?
I think it's so hard to just kind of like bring it down to nuts and bolts. But when I think about it, when I just think of the folks that I've talked to, the folks who have had those experiences, the folks who, are trained to make sure, we're all like, Black folks have a training. We don't always talk about it, but it's like, this is how you talk to police. This is how you make sure you're okay. And oftentimes if you're feeling suicidal, it depends on who you are and where you're at. But, the way in which you carry yourself might not be that clean, perfect way we're told to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Like not, yeah, you might not be code switching in crisis. You might be saying whatever is top of mind. And I know for me, I was definitely really impacted. I was working on this project in one of these California counties where they kept losing people of color because they kept being killed by police officers when it was a 5150 call. And 5150 in California's code for, law enforcement is called if it's a mental health crisis. And looking at the data was so wild because you could see where people would go. The people of color who were not killed would go to jail. And these were folks in psychiatric crisis or whatever you want to call it. I don't really love labels. But then if you were a white person, you were going to the mental health facility. It was super clear. It was clear in the numbers. It's so wild. I guess I was just so impacted, seeing the numbers and seeing racism in numbers. And that's such a weird sentence, but I was like, oh my God, it's not something that I think is happening, that I'm making up, that I keep, hearing about or saying oh, okay, a lot of us will say hey, I know you don't have another place to stay, but we can't call the cops. So we either got to drive you somewhere, and we don't even want to do that. Why is that? I don't know. I think in terms of the history, I don't have all of that knowledge, but in terms of what makes sense is does it make sense to have a lethal weapon when you're trying to de-escalate somebody? It doesn't. It doesn't make sense for someone who's already experiencing something to be afraid for their life. It's not a good way to live or to work with someone. So I don't know. I think for me, what really came up was the data. And Des knows I always talk about blue suicide, which gets me in trouble, but that's okay because that's what we're here for. A lot of this is research that I've done, but I talked to other Black communities, one in San Bernardino County, and I said, "Is suicide a problem in the Black community?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we have blue suicide." And I know activists get really angry when I talk about blue suicide. So this is just Black activists get upset about it because they're like, we don't want to ever say that someone was trying to die on purpose and use the cops because that just gives them an excuse to do that. But I will also say that it is a means to die. So if you are, the fact that you could be a Black person, and for those who don't know who blue suicide is, it's purposely antagonizing police officers as a means of death, right? And so that, it's not going to show up in any data because it's going to look like a homicide if it even shows up in data at all. And so we don't get captured, and those numbers don't get captured. And at the same time, I don't want to say that that's all of the reasons, but the fact that that's a means and it's a word in our community that we use, that is so heavy to me, and we don't talk about it. And we don't talk about the other means because, that's the way we don't get captured in the data. That's why our story isn't out there. That's why the interventions aren't out there, because we're not the ones that are in trouble.
Right. And I think when you put some of that information into the perspective of in the mental health community, if you're supposed to be doing a suicide assessment and one of the things you're supposed to be doing is means restriction, but you're also required to call 911 if someone is in a certain level of crisis, which is pretty ill-defined or whatever, depending on your state that you're in. All of them are ill-defined. The level of ill-defined depends on your state. So then if that's the method that someone wants to use, what is someone supposed to do? What's the guidance? That's how you can tell that those assessments have been informed by structural racism, because we're not even thinking about that kind of issue. It doesn't even cross the minds of the people making those assessments.
Facts. No, that's absolutely correct. So many things about how we present, because I would get turned away when I was actively seeking help, and I was actively suicidal. I would get turned away from hospitals because they said, "You're not sick enough. You don't look sick." And I'm like, this is when I'm saying I need help, that's what it looks like. And then I would attempt the next day because I couldn't get in. And then I would go to the same hospital that wouldn't let me in. And they're like, "Oh shit, you were serious." And I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't even want to be there. It was just what was there. It was that's what existed. And so the fact that I'm not reliable or people won't take me seriously when I'm saying I need help, is that whole unreliable part is such a challenge,
Yeah. I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you choose the phrase blue suicide rather than suicide by cop?
No, it could be suicide by cop. I just, I think I've used what people in the community have called it.
Okay.
But to be more active and streamlined, it's suicide by cop.
Okay. Someone made the comment. I don't think I've ever asked you that. I just kind of always knew what you meant and moved along.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I was like, it's what my folks said, so I said it.
Okay.
Do we want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what your experience was like filming the S Word? And I'll put a link to the S Word in the comments too.
Absolutely. I will love to talk about that. So for those of you who are just joining us and don't know, The S Word is a film by Lisa Klein starring Dese'Rae L. Stage. I want to say La Stage.
I can't.
and there's some other people in it. I am one of those other people.
It's all of us.
All of us are in it. And it was really interesting filming The S Word when I was suicidal. Like, that was a really interesting time. So what I don't talk about in the film is that when I was getting interviewed, I had just ended my engagement. And I just felt like everything, it was just like the end of a world. And I was really struggling. And I felt so much pressure to present, or not even present, but not just to look like I was okay. And then I was like, and we had a really great conversation about with Lisa, and she's like, just be who you are. You don't have to be any type of way. Just experience what you experience. And I was like, okay. And that was really interesting because to me, I can see it and I can see I'm really struggling. And still, when people say like, oh, I would have had no idea you were struggling. And I'm like, we just have such different experiences of each other. But it was a very powerful experience and really, really difficult at the same time, having to look at things. And there's a moment when Des asked me, like, is suicide still an option for you? And there was an answer I wanted to give her, like the good answer. And I just told her the truth. And I was like, I don't want it to be, but I can't say it's off the table. And I know that impacted my family. I know that, people got concerned for me. And I think there's like a film and you think it's going to have, you move on with stuff, but people still see you in that film. And that's the relationships and conversations you have to have after the film, I think was really interesting too. Because there was still a lot of healing to be done. So I'm so grateful to be part of that conversation. And I really wanted to underscore the importance of showing people that we all look different. And it impacts so many people that you don't know about. And I don't know, I found it really powerful, and it was a very interesting time to be filming it. Was when I was kind of right around like that rock bottom, where you're like totally rock bottom. You're like, I was like diet rock bottom. No, it was pretty bad.
Diet rock bottom.
Rock bottom light. I'm wondering if something that I've seen a lot that people do to you is to ask you to speak for like the whole Black community. And I'm wondering if that experience with the S Word was different or had some things that were similar to that for you, because I've seen it happen so much, but that wasn't my impression watching the film, but I'm not sure how that was from your perspective.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. That wasn't my perspective. And when I talked to Lisa about it, it was very much like she wanted my story. She wanted the story of me and my mother. She wanted me becoming an advocate. She was expecting, I think, to do one interview with me and be like, okay, I'm done. And then she was like, crap, you got more of a story. I need to follow you around and invade your apartment in a very consensual way. And so I never felt like I was part of the conversation, and I was glad to talk about the importance of race and the importance of being a person of color, being a Black woman, about the Black woman struggle of, not even presenting well, just like, this is how I was trained. Like this is how I look. If I say I'm in crisis, I am, but articulating it doesn't mean that I'm not. And that has been really incredible. And at the same time, I think people see the film and they're like, oh, we got a black one. Cool. We should invite her to everything that we do.
We got a black one.
We got a black one. Like, I am often in situations where I look around and I'm like, is it just me? Oh, I was like, oh, you saw the S, you Googled me, you found Live Through This, like you found me. You did not. There are so many other Black suicide attempt survivors, but I think I became like the darling in some ways and also a token.
Right.
So that has been an interesting experience. So I wasn't tokenized in the film. I said everything I wanted to. It was very authentic, but I think when people saw like, oh, we have a problem in our community, we need you to fix it. And I'm like this outsider. I do not speak for all Black people, clearly. Like I was like a Black goth in like the South. Like I am, come on. Like we're not like this big blob of people that have all the experiences. There's some things that we have that are similar, but I think it's been a challenge because I want to represent and show people that this is important and that it impacts people of color. But then I'm like, where are the other people of color? Why haven't you looked for them, asked for them? Because I'm not the only one. And so it becomes easy because I'm easy to find. And so now what I've done, someone asked me like, oh, could you speak at this youth conference? And I'm like, do you have a youth there? And they're like, because guess what? I'm not young. They're like, no. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I've had a lot of stage. So unless I'm with someone else, I'm not going to get on a stage. I'm not going to get on a stage to be this one viewpoint. You need a collection of voices. You need a collection of Black voices. You need queer voices. You need so many people with intersectionality. Like I only represent my story. And if it speaks to you, that's great. But there's so many other people who have different stories who present differently. Like when they're pissed, that's when they need support, and they look angry when they need support. I look like, hi, could I get some support? Like that's not the same story. So it's been this amazing experience and opened so many doors. And at the same time, I've definitely had these really odd interactions with people where they think I'm going to save the world in a keynote with my story, when I'm like, no, you need to do the work and involve where's your community? Because me as an outsider is not always helpful. So I want to raise up folks who have done good work, and they get local people to come, and it's a whole conversation. It's a dialogue. It's not the Kelechi show, because that's ego, and it's uninteresting to me.
Love it.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a good comment.
Ooh,
I want Kelechi to know about it.
What is the comment?
Where? Hello? Oh, that's very large. Erin Elizabeth says, my only experience watching Kelechi in action was at AAS last year, standing up for and calling out injustice in the moment. Yes.
We were just talking about it.
We were. And there it is.
Amazing. Hi. Thanks for leaving that comment. Oh, man. I was so mad. I was so angry. I was like, I can't go back there. That was so horrible. But yeah, well, I'm glad you were there. And that is, me trying to keep it real.
Well, that's one of those situations where they're like, you're the token. And when we've called them out on that in the past, the larger group, they've said, well, our doors are open. Just tell them to come. And it's like, no.
No, you burned bridges in communities. You have to do considerable outreach. You have to have cultural brokers. You have to make it safe for people to come there. When I came, it was not safe. It was not a safe experience. And it was the creepiest because it was like a faux safe experience, which would have been just easier if people were just saying the real thing. But it was very much like being, oh my God, what is that movie? Get Out. That's what I felt when I went in those doors.
You were like the sunken place?
I was like, yes. I was like, what is going on? I need to escape the sunken place. That's what it felt like. No, truly. I wanted to physically flee. So, that's information. My body will tell me if something's not okay. It is
Yeah.
like, girl, we got to get out of here. And I was like, we got a panel to be on. We can't.
We did do some really good panels.
I did love that. That was my favorite part. But the instance that we're talking about is someone, we're doing this whole presentation about why you need to involve suicide attempt survivors in the conversation, in the research, and this amazing research that this panel did. And I'm joining for like my insight and my part. And someone just asked this question, like, do you think people have the right to die? And folks answered the question, and this one person just wouldn't let it go. I was like, but not really, like not sick people, right? Like not people with like a real disease. And Jess is over there really talking about like, no, I mean that. And she said 5 different ways in very kind ways. Like, this is what I mean. And let me break it down further. Okay, I already broke it down. Let me break it down so much more. Okay, I still mean this thing. Like, I'm still telling you the same answer. And I just said, like, this is the problem. You are the problem, sir. Because she is literally telling you her experience and you will not listen. You will not hear it because it doesn't hear. Yay, animals. So I just got so upset and did my version of I did California angry, not New York angry. So California is like, not to shame you. New York is like, I'm going to shame you right now. So I did the like, not to shame you, sir, but this is exactly what we're talking about. You're going to stop asking this stupid question. She already answered it. And you're the problem with the system itself because you're not listening to us. And this is over. So that was my whole experience magnified. And then just different iterations of people saying like, oh, your hair is different. Are you sure you're that person from the S word? Because people, if I change my hair, I don't really get it. But apparently my face changes. Like I'm not the same Black person. But it was like, so it was like microaggression, macroaggression. It's still the same face.
Move your face over to the center of your screen so I can see it more.
Oh.
Wait, am I Kelechi still?
Yeah,
like,
you are Kelechi. You look like Kelechi.
Cool.
Just wanted to check.
But it was advanced. I even went to like a cultural competency meeting and I was like, this is a setup. Why am I doing this? And problematic things happened. It was run by white women. And I was like, I think this is telling me something.
Yeah.
So
I feel like this is a great segue into our beef corner where we talk about things we have beefs with.
You mean the thing I just did?
Yeah, it's really an hour of beef corner, but this is the spot that we reserve for anything beefy about.
Beefy? Did you say beef?
I said beef. Oh,
no. Oh no, Carol, why'd you kill him? Why did you kill him? Carol.
Oh gosh.
Well, I'm gonna make a rap plan now.
This is what you need it for, not for suicide, right?
Beef corner vegan edition.
Okay, who wants to start with some beefs?
Oh, I don't know. I could.
I have one. I always beef. Yeah. So,
okay, yeah, you go first.
Okay, so we've been like in my state, we've been trying to do social distancing or physical distancing, whatever the fuck we have to call it now. So we've been trying to not all die from illnesses because we can't follow basic public health, right? But like my state is supposed to open back up in like a week, less than a week. But also we haven't even reached the peak of where they think our like deaths are gonna be. So we're gonna just like open it back up because we're like, we did a good job. Less people died than we thought we're gonna. But like, I'm down the street from a hospital and there's like ambulatory morgues, which is basically a refrigerator truck that they're keeping bodies. Like that's happening all at the same time here. And as soon as the state lifts the orders, then everything that protects people goes away, which is the whole fucking point, right? This is systemic racism. This is systemic oppression of a bunch of different kinds. And it just feels like, not that it feels like, it's like a setup for fucking genocide. And I also feel like I have no idea what to do with that. It's just like happening, and we're theoretically stuck at home. So that's my beef of the moment.
That was like the briefest beef.
It's bad.
But it was deep beef. It was like really like it was like Kobe type beef. Like it was, like layered and stuff. So I really appreciated. No, I feel like California is just doubling down on like you will never leave. But my home state of Georgia's like, what up? We out on Friday. And I'm like, no guys.
Come get your haircuts and your tattoos.
Yeah, no, seriously. Haircuts. I'm like, how do you do a 6 foot like I don't know. Like I don't really get it. So I totally I feel you on that one. I'm like, we're not done. So I know people want to leave. To add to your beef, my beef has been watching these protesters and these freaking signs like my body, my choice. And I'm like, Lord, this is not what that meant. That is not what that sign meant. This was about this was not what that meant. That has been my absolute beef. But the other thing that has been really, and I feel you, I'm like, we need to just listen to science. So, I mean, I'm glad that California listens to science. But the other thing that has been kind of on my beef corner has been these freaking commercials. I don't know how they made them, but it's like T-Mobile. It's like, we're here for you. And if someone says in these unprecedented times, one more unprecedented, uncertain, I'm like, we don't need your fear addiction crap. Like and you don't also need to remind me that you exist for your capitalism. Like, hey, don't forget, we did a nice commercial. So you should don't forget to buy stuff from us later when you can. Like, what is this?
Like, we're not already indebted to them.
Seriously.
My favorite ones are the fucking car commercials. I'm like, you're trying to sell cars right now?
Seriously.
Vehicles that you buy online and then they show up outside. That's what you're trying to do right now?
Look, guys, I don't have regular TV, so this is just baffling to me.
Oh, you don't need it. You don't need it.
I mean, I still pay for enough different fucking services that I may as well have cable.
You got Netflix, Hulu, Amazon. You're like, I think you have cable.
I have HBO. I think we have Showtime right now. Disney Plus. Because I need a TV to raise my children at the moment. No shit.
Oh yeah. No kidding.
But
no,
also,
what you have to do is get a community of people. You have to get a community of people. And you're like, we have Amazon, you got Netflix. Let's do this. This is how you collaborate.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I pay for the accounts for my whole family. So
you're already kind of doing that, but
and then I steal Jess's whatever I don't have, I steal hers.
Yeah, I've been giving my cable login to fucking everyone for years, and then every once in a while Comcast will be like, "Hey, you're on in 6 different states." I think someone stole your password. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess so. Everybody got a question mark. Yeah, just doing what we can to fight capitalism.
Every day, just share things.
Mm-hmm.
Jess, you got a beef?
I have so much beef. Okay, so my beef started with getting bullied on the internet by some fucker.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I'm always asking for money for Live Through This or for people who want help or need help or whatever. I'm constantly putting up a GoFundMe or whatever. So a couple of weeks ago, my grandfather died, and he died on the 5th of April, and his Social Security check came in on the 1st. And so they paid all the bills with that. My uncle paid all the bills for my grandmother, and then a couple of days later, the check got taken back from the government, and all of those payments bounced. Yeah.
Oh no.
So it became this really huge shit show, and I had I've lost all of my jobs for the foreseeable future. We're living on one income right now. So I had $250 frittered away somewhere, and I sent that, but we needed more $1,400. I'm not even sure if that was right, but so I said, hey friends, on Facebook, and I think I also put it on Twitter. I was like, here's what's up. This sucks. If you're willing to help my family, that would be great. And people did. They really helped my family. We got more than $1,400. So ultimately, like, my uncle was able to put it in an account for my grandmother for the future, because then we can't, I didn't know this, maybe they did, but now she has to live on that one Social Security check forever. And it's like, it already wasn't enough to live on. Like, it wasn't enough to pay basic bills. Like, when they say that people who are getting these checks are living at the poverty line, like, they're not even at the poverty line. I don't know, whatever. It's infuriating. So, I bought a food scale the other day. It cost me $18, and I posted a picture of it on Instagram, and I was like, this is so fancy. I'd never had a food scale. I was like, oh, I could weigh shit in grams. I don't know. I don't. Maybe people who do drugs and who use drugs. Maybe that's that's the thing.
Yeah. Also, people are allowed to use fucking drugs. I mean, like, not legally, but it's like, you're not, like, it's not your job as somebody's Facebook friend to be like, don't use drugs.
Oh,
like,
no, it wasn't about that. But, like, I'm like, I don't know. This food scale seems really fancy and novel to me. And I posted that. And someone was like, made a whole Instagram account to message me anonymously and shame me because I didn't appreciate the help that people had given me by buying this $18 food scale, because I had just been begging for money, as they said. And I was like, I'm making bread for my family. And then they shared some more stuff about how I'm letting myself go, and my house is filthy.
What?
All kinds of things. And they let me know that they know me in person, that they are my Facebook friend, that they've been watching me, and I let myself go. And I'm just like, well, unfriend me. Fuck. Like, if you don't like me.
Bye.
But it's on my nerves. And there's been some, I've been thinking about the feedback from that. You know, I've heard people say, we got to rise above it. You know, they deserve your kindness. I'm trying to be more patient with people. And this is feedback from people I really love. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, fuck that. They don't deserve my kindness. They don't deserve my patience. And I think this was feedback from people who identify as women. And I'm like, this is the way we were fucking socialized. We were socialized to be nice and to take bullshit from people who don't even deserve our fucking presences in their lives. And I'm just mad about it. I'm just mad. No one deserves my kindness. Like, that's a courtesy if you get it and you're a dick to me. At best, it's a I'm mad. I'm mad. That's my beef.
And you have the right to be mad. That is not okay. And, you know, I'm all for being, like, kind, but that's, you know, that was a targeted attack. That wasn't like someone said something, like, kind of insensitive and, you know, you're like, oh, I'll rise above. That was like someone went through the trouble to freaking cyberbully you.
Well, they came back and let me know that they had seen the Facebook post that came out of it, the first one. There have been several, because it's just fun for me now. But, like, it has pushed my
now
buttons.
You have fun.
There's a whole new Twitter account about it. Like, let me rate your pandemic purchases. I'm enjoying that. But, like,
leaning in.
Yeah, enjoying it. But also, I mean, certainly they pushed my buttons. They knew which buttons were there. You know, like, they told me my hair always looked dirty. And I'm like, there's so much product in my hair, even when it's clean, that it probably looks fucking dirty. Like, right now, my hair is sparkling clean, and it looks dirty.
Oh. It's pretty to me.
It's a look.
It's a look. And my house is filthy. It's like, you do not have 2 children, person. Oh, also, I could make a meal for 4, a huge meal for 4 with $18. But, like, if you assume...
Oh, really? In what state?
Right. If you assume that I'm making a healthy meal that, like, has me going the other direction from letting go, it's certainly not going to be an $18 meal for 4.
Yeah, right.
Just all of it was a real problem. And I think the thing that really got to me at first was that this is the shit that contributes to people not asking for help. And, like,
because people judge them.
Yeah. And Jess and I are always going back and forth with shit. Like, she doesn't even do it intentionally, but she'll be like, fuck, like, my money is all fucked up. And I'll be like, what do you need? And then we go back and forth. And I think that when people ask for help, they should get it. And you shouldn't dictate. Like, if you choose to help them, you shouldn't dictate how they're going to receive that help. No. You know, and the most obvious example we have is with houseless people, and, like, oh, they're going to go use the money I gave them for drugs or drinks. It's like, I don't give a fuck. I gave you my $5. You do whatever you need.
Yeah, for real.
And that should be the same thing. Like, just because I asked for money from my family doesn't mean I don't get to buy a fucking food scale with money that me or my wife earned. Fuck that.
Right.
You know, I help people every day of my life, whether it's in my actions or with my own fucking money. Like, fuck you. I hate that person. I want to know who they are.
Yeah.
There
I
it
think they're
is.
a goddamn coward.
There's like no shortage of fuckery.
It really isn't.
We have covered a lot of ground of fuckery so
We
far.
did. There was so much fuckery covered.
So we got about 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes. So
Or more,
I'm
if
wondering
you
if you want to talk about something that's less on the fuckery side and more on the cool side, which is like some of the work that you're doing around digital mental health, tech, suicide prevention stuff.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So I was on a statewide project in California that was promoting digital wellness tools for folks, and I'm currently working with some suicide attempt survivors and some researchers, and they're creating this app for folks who have attempted suicide and they're basically stuck in an ER. It's called Jasper, and the cool thing about it is it has stories like of people who have lived experience, other suicide attempt survivors in it. But it's also something to do. Like some of it's like, here, look at puppies. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been in an ER for a really long time and you're just like waiting and waiting and waiting because you're like not as important as other people. So they just got you waiting somewhere. So I think this is something I'm really excited about, is the idea of bringing tech into places that could actually help people. The other thing that I've been spending more time on is just like trying to work with more tech folk about, they do a lot of UX and like user design. And I'm like, that's cool. Maybe you should ask people what they need. So that's my recent goal. And I'm talking to a group of like researchers and like people doing like really far advanced stuff in Google and Facebook. And I'm going to talk to them in this like kind of like small setting this week. But my goal is really to say, like, don't ask people if you like the red button or the green button for mental health. Bring them in as research partners, pay them, and have them help you design it, because you have so much tech out there that no one's using. I did this it's amazing. I would talk to 300 stakeholders for this project that I was on in a period of a summer. And and the whole point was to understand how they use technology for their mental health. What are they doing? And I'm expecting people are going to tell me like, I use the Rap app. They're all like, oh, I use YouTube for music. I really am really stressed. Mm-hmm. They're telling us stuff that they need and that they're using. And then people are designing things that are totally different. Mm-hmm. And people are like, I need help getting, like, I can't sleep. So I do stuff to like help my sleep. I mean, a lot of people use the Calm app, but for the most part, people wanted peer support. And the biggest thing that people wanted was, this is not going to be a plot twist. They were like, I want crisis support when I'm suicidal, but I don't want law enforcement involved. And I was like, oh my God, this is so shocking.
They're all building surveillance mechanisms into their technology instead, right?
I was like, So what people really wanted was peer support with suicide attempt survivors, with other people like them 24/7, but that did not involve them getting like thrown away. And I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it. I'm actually not sorry. So trying to correct that stuff. So that's what I am working on, is saying like, hey, why don't you design things that people need and that they'll actually use? Because if not, they're going to use YouTube for mental health, which is fine. Use YouTube for mental health all day. But I think there's research and folks who want to do good, but they have a disconnect on the like human side of things. And I want to bridge that gap. So that's what I'm really excited about doing. And we'll see how this conversation goes. And if I offend a whole bunch of people, and if I did, that's great. That means I did something good. Because if you're comfortable after I'm done talking to you, then I didn't do anything.
Right.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I feel like people, especially white folks, need to learn a lesson about like discomfort being different than being unsafe.
Yes.
Like you haven't been attacked because you feel uncomfortable. I mean, maybe you have, but you haven't been like harmed, your safety hasn't been compromised because you feel uncomfortable. Those are different things. But as people with a lot of privilege, oftentimes folks think like, I am having this experience. This must be what unsafe means. I don't like it. I'm going to get away. And this is your fault. Like you, like person with less privilege than me, who is like used to being uncomfortable all the time in the world that was designed just for me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. I did a keynote at the Redefining Crazy conference in San Francisco, and someone asked me a question, and it was one of those questions where it was like, how do we deal with well-intentioned white people? And it was a person of color. I was like, child, did you just set me up in this room to answer this damn question? But I said, look, I've been hurt by a lot of well-intentioned white people who mean to do good, but it doesn't feel comfortable. So I would say, if you're serving communities and you look around and everyone looks like you, that's a problem. Why is it like that? What are you going to do to change it? And what is the work that you need to do? Do you know, as soon as I said that, I had so many people tell me how that they were good white people and that they weren't bad. And I was like, I wasn't even, no, this strange, you know, after you talk, they're like, oh my gosh, but this is how I integrate people of color. And I'm like, if you need to tell me that you're one of the good ones, then you're not.
Wait, I have a URL for that. Itain'taboutyou.com.
Yeah. Just like buys these things and then just like sends them to people. It's wonderful.
It ain'taboutyou.com. Oh my gosh.
These are my hobbies.
I love it.
I think one of the things that you were kind of getting at is this like sort of binary thinking. So much of our thinking that like causes like white folks to have like fragile distress is about like creating this binary. So like, if I don't feel completely secure, then I must be unsafe. So that's one binary. Well, if I'm not a perfect white person, then I must be a bad white person to justify why I'm a good one. And I need people of color to like validate me and how good I am at being white. And so like, then it just creates this whole other mess that we go into things with that binary idea of how the world works. And that's just like not the case.
Yeah, I think about like people who are true allies that I've seen in the world. Like this one woman, Daphne Golub, she's an artist, a writer in San Francisco. She's a white woman. And if you want to book her, she's like, you have to book a person of color. That's just her one rule. Every time, if you want to book her, she will not go on a stage unless there's a person of color there. And so that is a way that she has just made. So now people just are like, oh crap, if we need her, we better invite these other people. And she's just doing that. And she doesn't have to tell people like about themselves. It's just her requirement. And I'm like, that's how an ally shows up. It's like, she didn't make it about herself. She said, no, you actually have to change it or I'm not showing up. And I'm like, that has inspired me. I'm not perfect. I mess up. Like, doing work in trans community, I learned a lot of things. I had to change a lot of words that I was not using correctly. And I had a lot of kind, gentle people correct me and show me how to be a better ally to them. And one of the things, you know, and I'm so excited to also promote like Trans Lifeline, because they will not call cops on you. They're like, no. And I'm like, you can show us how to do better in this world. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if you're not part of a community, you don't have to be the perfect or good one. You're going to mess up, but to avoid doing your work is the problem. And I'm like, you have to do your work. I don't always look good. Oh my God, I've messed up. And I'm so glad people were there to correct and believe that I had a good intention to keep going. Yay, Trans Lifeline. They're so dope. But yeah, I feel you on that so much. I feel you on that. Like, you're not, you know, don't make it about you. Do your work.
I put .com and it's .org.
.org. None of us got .com.
I'm sure .com forwards, but .org.
I think one of the things that's helpful as we're doing this work is that like, because we're all imperfect in it, we are learning how to be good at this on the backs of other people, right? So if we don't hold those mistakes close to ourselves and learn from them, then we're like doing a double disservice to the people that we've already harmed in our imperfectness. So like that's how you do the work too, is by like remembering that moment when you fucked up. And I have anxiety, so I get to play those all night, every night for the rest of my life, but also like that's part of what makes you better and better, is by not pushing it away, but bringing it in.
No, that's so awesome. And I gave Leigh and I did this presentation back in January, and it was like suicide prevention strategies for folks. And I'd never, it's like, don't read the comments. I read the survey comments, and there was, it doesn't matter what it was, because it's like all this good feedback. And then there's that one person who stayed, and they wanted to have a reckoning with you. And I just was so activated by this feedback that like, this isn't what I wanted, this is horrible. But we were really talking honestly and sharing like, hey, the way the system is, we talked about internalized racism, we talked about racism, we talked about structural, we talked about oppression. A lot of people were uncomfortable. A lot of people who wanted to do things the same way were uncomfortable. And I made someone uncomfortable, and I felt so bad. And then I realized, I was like, you can't make people feel, you can't people please in this work. You cannot, because the system is broken and you're telling them that. So if they want to stay in it, then you're going to automatically have a challenge there. So, this isn't easy work, but it's so important. And trying not to take like what that idiot said to you, Des, or like any of these experiences that we have away from like our purpose and our mission, because we need us. We really do. So, yeah.
True.
Okay. Any very brief final thoughts, because we're right at the end, which time went so fast.
God, what happened? It's so wild.
It did. So fast. And everything cooperated with us, which has not been the case for a while. Like, we've been having a rough time.
Unicorn. That's what this is.
Yes.
Unicorns. I just want to say thank you guys for having this space and just like showing people we can have like fun, dope ass conversations about suicide, because people are like, oh, what do you work in? And I'm like, suicide. Like, ah! I'm like, oh, we can have these real ass conversations, and I appreciate the space.
Yeah.
Of course, this was awesome. I really appreciated you coming on and being flexible with us when we had to cancel before.
Oh my God.
Love to have you back again sometime too, because I think there's a million more things to talk about. So
yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that about this show too, where we can like rebook people because we run it. We get to just like talk about whatever we want. That's pretty cool.
That's the benefit of running the show.
Well, I have another unicorn shirt, so just holler at me and I'll be ready.
I'll put my
it's actually darker.
I have my Elizabeth Warren shirt on right now.
Holla.
That was mostly just a way to show off my tits.
Anything interesting. It's all black always. I'm still the goth. Yeah. I don't know.
You're an inspiration.
It's true. It's true. Like, you have lipstick on and you're at home, and I put a sports bra on. Like, I admire that, your ability to do it.
I put on pants for you.
Oh my God.
I haven't worn pants in 5 weeks. Like, literally.
I just wear the same joggers. Just the same ones.
I have to pick between like makeup and like real clothes. So this is like a weird like exercise catsuit thing. It's like not.
Yeah, you've brought that catsuit.
Not as good as it looks, but then I did makeup, so it's one or the other. You can't have it all right now.
I love it.
That's amazing. Best. Thanks, people who joined.
Yeah, thanks everyone. This was awesome. I guess we're signing off.
All right. Peace, bitches.
Bye.
Bye.